Friends, we are in for a treat today. Our community is lucky enough, privileged enough to have a mother-daughter duo coming to the stage right now from a family whose multi-generational legacy has left an indelible mark of justice and inspiration on the city of San Jose. Today, we're invited to be a witness. Alvarado, ALF Class 3, for those of you who are counting, is a former radio announcer, small business owner, elected official, and continuing social activist. I'm just going to read a couple of lines from her bio that I thought stood out and I want you to be aware of. The daughter of a union coal miner, she was born in Colorado and moved to the Silicon Valley when the mine closed. She graduated alongside Norma Netta from San Jose High School. In the 50s, she joined her husband at KLOK Radio, hosting her own show. In the 60s and 70s, Alvarado worked with Cesar Chavez to establish the Community Services Organization. Was involved with the Chicano Employment Committee in the early days of what would later become the Center for Employment Training, and was president of the local chapter of the Mexican American Political Association. In the 80s, she was elected as the first San Jose City Council member for District 5, representing East San Jose until 1994, and served as San Jose's first Latina vice mayor. In 1995, she was appointed to the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, where she spent 12 years representing District 2, retiring in 2008 after serving 28 years in local office. And then she stole the show in the documentary Changing Boundaries, The History of San Jose. And if you haven't seen it, produced by Norm Klein, you really should check that out. When we saw that at the California Theater and Blanca spoke, there was almost a standing ovation and a couple of the lines that she said. So I'll never forget that moment. And of course, Blanca is joined on stage today by her youngest. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I invite you to please help me in welcoming these incredibly inspiring women to the stage, Blanca and Teresa.
And I do want to acknowledge that we were hoping to have this program last year during President Fernando's year. We couldn't quite make it work, of course, with COVID and whatnot, but we're really happy to be here now. And I'm so excited to be joined by my mom. So Mama, tell us about when you first came to San Jose in, what was it, 1947 or so? And what was the community like? What was your involvement in high school, San Jose High? And then meeting my dad and his leadership in the community at that time.
Well, the first thing I want to say, Teresa, is that I'm so happy that you and Jaime are here with me, because you exemplify products from a family that was community engaged as far back as I can remember. They followed in the footsteps of their father and their mother, made their own footsteps. You know about Teresa's accomplishments, and for sure, we recognize the good work that Jaime has done in the community as well. But it was very, very gratifying to walk in to this place today and to be reminded how grateful I am, and we all are, to be part of this exceptional community. And to be in the midst of exceptional Rotarians is something that I value very highly. But I also want to acknowledge my friend, George Tilson, who was one of your premier volunteers, who is no longer with us. George was my campaign manager in 1982. And of course, Fernando and I go back so many decades, we stopped counting. But I want to thank Fernando for all the work that he has done, not only as outgoing president of Rotary, but for your unfailing commitment to making our communities better for all. And then back to my beginning. Actually, I was born in this little coal mining town called Cokeville in Colorado. It's now a historical setting in the state of Colorado. But the mines closed down. My father was a coal miner, and we moved to San Jose in 1947. And of course, when we first landed here, we came with the expectation, like so many immigrants from around the world, to make a home and to find employment in this beautiful valley of Life. And indeed, it was a beautiful valley of Life. I remember to this day the aroma, the fragrance, and I remember standing at the top of Alvarado and looking down at this carpet of white and pink blossoms. and taking that all into this day, that memory stays with me.
But we went and we lived at the McClay Ranch, two sisters that owned property on Quimby and White Road. And my father was very small farm laborers. We lived in tents, and we lived in tent shacks. And it wasn't until the end of the harvest season that my father was offered a job as foreman of the McClay Ranch, so we ended up staying in San Jose, which of course was the best thing that ever happened to us. The thing that was remarkable about San Jose at that time is its ethnicity. There were people, as I said, from all over the world who came to work in the fields, come to work in the harvest, who came to work at the Bear and Great Packing House, icy cold Bear and Great Packing House, which exported fruit cocktail all over the world. And then in the east side, there was the Mayfair Cannery. But the ethnicity was replete. Most of the people that I grew up with in Cokeville were from Poland, were from Italy, were from all over different parts of the world, and they came to work in the mines. And then when I came to San Jose, we were surrounded again with ethnicity that established in my mind once and for all that San Jose was destined to be the model county of the world in terms of people from different places and backgrounds living together. And yes, we've had our share of racial conflict, but we still exemplify what America should become in totality across the world.
You know, it is unfortunate, however, we are at a turning point in Santa Clara County because, as you know, the entire Bay Area has become absolutely unaffordable to many. And we're threatened not only with homelessness and some real disparities and inequalities that have served us as this area has boomed into such enormous success. But the threats are there, and we all have to be held accountable to take our part, as you are Rotarians, in making a difference. We can all make a difference, and we all have to make a difference.
Thank you, Mom. So jumping forward a couple of decades, Suzanne mentioned district elections and you being elected to the first District 5 seat. If you can remind folks or inform those who don't know about our civic history about the transition to district elections and talk about the leaders who came from that era of change.
It's really wonderful to look back to the time when Janet Gray Hayes, a beautiful mayor and absolutely beloved mayor for minorities in particular, we really, really cared about her. But her generosity and her inclusivity was one of her trademarks. But she was mayor and she formed the big bicentennial, well, first she appointed me to the Bicentennial Commission and following that to the Charter Review Committee. And I remember with a great deal of affection that it was my first introduction to Charlie Davidson. He was one of the committee members, and I'm sure many of you in this room remember Charlie. And the other person that has gained real national prominence is federal judge Jerry Fogel. There were others, like Dee Robinson was also on the Charter Review Committee, although she remembered very little about it. But it was a remarkable time because when we surveyed forms of government across the country and came forward with a recommendation to the mayor and to the city council that the at-large elections be changed to by district. And so we went to the voters in 1978, and the voters barely approved the amendment to the charter, but the 10 districts were established, and lo and behold, in 1980, it was just a remarkable turn of events. The political shift was so enormous. We were able to elect across the city women activists, neighborhood activists, people like Janet Gray Hayes, who actually became mayor because of her activism in Rose Garden. And of all of the 7 members that were elected to the city council in 1980, the 7 women all came from neighborhoods. There was Iowa Williams, there was Pat Saucedo, Marge Matthews, Tracy Johnson, later Charlotte Powers and Susan Hammer, and of course Nancy Ion Littleman. It was a remarkable turn of events. Not only did we have 8 women, including the mayor, on the city council governing the city. But we also had, I believe, Diane McKenna, Susie Wilson, and Eva Zolak and Rebecca Morgan on the board of supervisors. So, you know, everything changed. And one of the things that I reflect with great gratitude is the egalitarian, inclusive, collaborative group of women at Three Males that I work with, including Tom Henry, who was representing the city council, District 3, and Jim Bell and Jerry Esther. But they were all wonderful colleagues, and because Janet Gray was our mayor, somehow she was able to govern efficiently and effectively with 7 women and 3 males, and we were off to the races in 1981, and particularly reflective of that era is the attention to the district that we were elected from, but also a vision for the citywide necessities, which is about the time that Frank Taylor had conceived the redevelopment agency, and the redevelopment zones had already been formed. And so that's a whole other story with redevelopment. But it was an incredible time of social and political transformation. And so, I don't know if that answers the question.
Incredibly.
And even today, we are seeing more and more women, more and more people of color being elected. And so across the world, across the country, we are seeing that change, and it's all for the good.
And it's because of this pioneering group that we had here in San Jose. It's incredible. So with these new council members focused on their districts, really identifying what the local needs were. Talk a little bit about what district elections revealed in terms of the history of inequity in our city and injustice, and how you sought to address those issues on your time on the city council and the board of supervisors.
I will take those two separately, because when I was elected to the city council, I represented a district of the lowest income population, the highest density, the poorest educational standards, everything that could be considered low class, lower, inferior, stigmatized, crime-ridden, all of the negative connotations that you could apply to a district were applied to District 5. But what made my job so challenging was not only that I had many low-income families to represent and to speak for, but there were so many issues. Where do we start? Where do we start? We had not only inferior housing like Pokaway, but we were so lacking in social amenities, educational amenities, housing standards. We were lacking in so many things. So how to develop a plan of action for District 5, which was so very, very needy. And we had some very controversial things happening in the district too. Absentee landlords running and taking the money from tenants on Pokaway, but not doing any of the upgrades or the maintenance or improving the conditions for the tenants. We had what was known as a cruising capital of California. And so on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we had streams and streams and streams of cars from all over California.
I might have been in one or two of those.
Well, it was a cultural phenomenon. It was something that young people like to do. But it was also creating a huge impact on the residents and the businesses of Story Road. Families couldn't get into their garage, couldn't get in and out of their homes because the traffic was so incessant, it was continuous, and the noise was just as loud. So you can imagine my trying to find a solution to that in the heart of a cultural phenomenon that was so loved by so many people, especially Latinos. And then to deal with the lack of adequate housing, the lack of medical access to facilities. There was just so many things. So in the first 2 years, I tried to learn the ropes. I'd never governed. What was it like to govern? You know, it's a whole new experience. Nobody ever teaches you how to govern. It just happens. And so for a year, I learned to navigate the institution known as City Hall and to keep in touch with my constituents and to make relationships with my colleagues on the council. But eventually, I had a very, very difficult reelection in 1982 because the odd numbered districts were required to go out and get reelected after a 2-year stint as newly elected. So once I went through that very rigorous campaign, I was able to formulate a plan for the next 4 years. And thankfully, I had a supportive mayor in Tom McHenry. I had a supportive city council who recognized that there had been little or no public investment in East San Jose in District 5, and that while Evergreen next door was thriving and Berryessa to the left was thriving as well, our pocket of misery and corruption and needs was so outstanding that the fact that I was able to get my entire city council to help me improve conditions is something that I will, and District 5 should be eternally grateful for. But let me tell you about the county, because the county was a very different place. The county, when I was appointed, Zoe Lofgren, as you know, had been elected to Congress, and I was appointed to take her seat. In 1995, I was installed. And so for several months in those first 2 years, I also had to relearn all over what a governmental institution the size of county government was all about. And it is still blows me away when I think of the multitude of services that emanate out of county government. And I say that with great pride and admiration because most of the people, 90% of the people in Santa Clara County, and Rod will attest to this, have little knowledge of what county services are all about. They see it as the place for the county hospital, which had a bad connotation even back then. They saw it as a place for the courts and for jails. But beyond that, they did not recognize, and it was also where social services was housed, which meant all the poor people, right? So a county government was a whole other layer of governmental services. But the most remarkable thing about being in government at the county level is the degree to which I recognized that many of the services that were being given by the county were being used by Latinos, by minorities. It is ironic to say that. It is sometimes painful to say that. But it brought my attention to the fact at the juvenile hall, most of the incarcerated were Latino youth. I saw that most of the poor people that went to the county hospital before it was modernized were people from the east side or from the downtown district. I saw a great lack of attention to the inacceptance of minorities as being an integral and contributing part of society. But we made a difference, again, with some really good colleagues. We undertook juvenile detention reform. We rebuilt. I was not there when the decision to rebuild the county hospital was made, but Rod was there. And following that, we embarked on the specialty center, which now has incredible services on Bascom. And we also extended the number of clinics. We went as far south as Gilroy, we went as far north as Mountain View, we did something in El Viso. I mean, the expansion of the clinics was really one of the things that I take the most pride in, because we are now a premier medical institution with the trauma center at Valley Medical and with known expertise and professionalism at the highest level, not only in our county, but throughout the state and throughout the nation. So it was a remarkable time. It was a remarkable time to be at the forefront of innovations like juvenile detention reform, medical expansion, open space, our beautiful open space, our parks, our recreation. There was so much that we were offering Santa Clara County residents, and to have been part of that entourage of policymakers and very dedicated staff something that, again, I'm really grateful for. But everything isn't always, peaches and cream and rosy. There were problems along the way. And I think that when I look back on the unfinished business, there are things yet that I'm resentful for, that we were not able to accomplish. I don't know what the status is now, but there was a time when we tried vigorously to ban gun shows at the fairgrounds. And of course, we were legally defeated as unconstitutional over and over again. But that was one of our major undertakings. There was also a time when we had this incredible development proposal that included the House of Blues to renovate and redevelop the fairgrounds. At that time, it seemed like a way to upgrade the neighborhood surrounding the fairgrounds, but it also meant establishing a venue that could produce some money for the county, but at the same time, provide a recreational entertainment venue for all residents, no matter whether it's all the way south or all the way north. And we were on the verge of authorizing the development when, unfortunately, the city council, San Jose City Council, sued the county, and from there on, the project was killed. The other thing that is distressing still for me today is the battles that we undertook to get equality in light rail. And, Rod was the initiator, one of the movers and shakers for establishing the light rail system in the south part of the city. But when the Colorado came before the city council to authorize or to get approval from the city council for the next leg of the light rail system, it was going to be from Los Gatos to the downtown. And I will never forget that he promised me that night that the light rail to East San Jose would be the next project before the voters for approval. Well, it's never happened. It never happened. We never got our light rail project to East San Jose. And we never got our light rail project from Allen Rock to the airport, Reed Hillview, or to East Ridge. And so that's still unfinished business as far as I'm concerned.
And those voters voted for it at high rates, and they've been paying for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, many of us did. We were remarkably generous at the poll. Whenever there was a sales tax measure, East Siders always voted in great numbers to expend that. But the one remaining issue, and I know that we've talked about this, forever. We all know what's coming. It's the airport. Reed Hillview has been a nuisance, a danger, has been environmentally toxic to area residents. There are numerous schools, high schools, grammar schools, elementary schools, residentially developed, densely populated residential areas, a Capital Expressway. And we have for years and years and years petitioned the county to relocate that airport elsewhere. We've never been successful. It has been an ongoing battle for 40 years, and I certainly don't want to, I don't even know, Rod, what your position was back then, but we'll talk about it later. But for now, we have, I think you and you and McCorkadale were the ones that tried back then as well. So thank you, Rod, and thank you, Dan McCorkadale. But finally, with the leadership of Cindy Chavez and David Cortese and the new elected board members, it looks like on August the 17th, we are going to have the opportunity to review the findings of the lead study that was commissioned several months ago. And we're also going to be in a position to finally, hopefully, get full approval from the board to relocate that airport out of that area. So anybody that's interested in helping us petition the Board of Supervisors on the 17th of August, you are welcome. But let's talk about movement, shall we?
Okay, well, I'm not doing much talking, but please do. You're on a roll. I love it.
I think my entire community political life has been part of a movement. Way back when I was in San Jose High, we organized a little group called Club Tapatio, intending to seek funding, food, clothing for needy families. But it was much, much later when the farm worker movement took hold in California and throughout the country that we understood the value of people coming together to right injustice and to really speak out in support of demonized, often overlooked, uncared for human beings who were in fact the toilers in the field who provide us with our food. So the farm worker movement was pivotal. It really raised our awareness about the importance of movements. And we've seen over time the Vietnam War movement, we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen the Me Too movement. We're also seeing the LGBTQ community raise in movements. We're now seeing a movement to protect Asians from the violence that has been perpetrated upon them. Movements and movements and movements. It means people, people, people. And we are now seeing these movements bear fruit in our communities. They have borne fruit over time. But the one that I am the most admiring of is the movement that is led by young children, the Greta Thunbergs and the Jerome Fosters of the world, who are taking on climate change in ways that are so absolutely essential. We're looking at people like Malia, who is fighting for educational rights for women. We see so many movements of promise. And so with that, I think I'm a little bit hopeful that although I am dismayed, alarmed by the fact that our democracy is under assault and in danger, I am so motivated to be an advocate for the Greta Thunbergs of the world and the Malias of the world and the people who are claiming that we must get back to protecting our democracy. Because as an elder, I've lived a long and fruitful life. And I can try to impress and be a good role model for my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. But I think that my task now is to do everything that I can to use this raspy voice of mine to say, let's all get on board, let's all get up, let's all do what has to be done to recognize that the devastation wreaked upon us by global warming is something that we can all be responsible and held accountable for. And that with our democracy imperiled, all of us can speak up to the importance of elections and protecting our electoral rights. Thank you.
Mic drop. Love it. Thank you, Mama. I want to comment on a couple of quick things. One thing that Mom didn't talk about was children's health insurance. Santa Clara County was the first county in the country in partnership with working partnerships to pass children's health coverage for all children in our county, which is an incredible accomplishment, became a model for other counties across the country. And of course, as we've seen with COVID and public health, how important health insurance is. Another thing I wanted to just touch on is I remember in 1976 and 77, we had a major drought in California. And I remember our lawn going brown and my mother admonishing me to turn the water off while I was brushing my teeth. And I think that experience drew me toward the environmental movement. My undergrad is in environmental studies. My master's degree is in civil and environmental engineering. And I've had a whole career in environmental management and justice. And because my mama has always been an environmentalist, I want to just acknowledge that she and Supervisor Rod Diridon are being honored by Green Foothills, Megan Fluke's organization this year at their Nature's Inspiration event. So I would welcome you all to attend that and be inspired by the movement to address climate change. In closing, if you want to learn more about my mom's background, there was a great profile of her in Spotlight in February. She recently had an oral history done about her via several Zoom interviews conducted remotely during COVID, and now published and stored at the Oral History Center at Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley. And her full archives can be found at the San Jose State Martin Luther King Jr. Library. And with that, I would ask you all to do me one last favor. My mother's 90th birthday is next Wednesday. Can we sing happy birthday? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mom. Happy birthday to you.
And Blanca and Teresa, as a small token of you participating today, we're going to make a donation in your name to Symphony Silicon Valley. With that, thank you all, and we'll see you next week.